Harper Audio presents Hill Towns by Anne Rivers Siddons, performed by Marcia Harden. When I was 5 years old, I made a coldly desperate decision to live forever in a town on a hill. And so I have, from that terrible night in June until this one, 37 years and 1 month later. If it has been bad for me, I can only consider that anything else would have been worse. They never saw it coming. They didn't know what hit them, everybody said after my parents were struck and killed by a speeding truck on the old chain bridge over Sweetwater Creek. After that, I knew as simply and inalterably as a child knows anything, that staying alive meant always being able to see what was coming, always knowing what might hit you. So when my father's parents, kind and substantial Virginians from the Tidewater, who might have given me every advantage, made to take me home with them after the funeral, I simply screamed and screamed until, in despair, they left me behind with my mother's eccentric people who lived at the top of the mountain. I had great affection for my Virginia grandparents and little for the erratic, reclusive Cashes, but the ramshackle, overgrown cash house commanded the Blue Ridge foothills in all directions. From there, I could always know what was coming. From there, I would see it long before it saw me. I could not have explained that at age 5, of course. I have only just recently become fully aware of it. Then, I only knew that on the mountain I was safe, and off it I was not. Everything in my small being strained after my grandmother and grandfather Compton as they drove away. But the new flatland fear was stronger. It held me on the mountain through all those years that, in retrospect, seemed to have been lived in a kind of green darkness, until I met Joe Gilliard in my senior year at Trinity College, and the last lingering darkness took fire into light. When I told him about my parents' death, he cried. I stared at him doubtfully. No one had ever cried upon hearing the manner of their deaths, and some few laughed outright, nervous, half-stifled laughter. I learned early to parrot laughter at Montview Day, where my Compton grandparents' absentee largesse sent me, when the children taunted me with it. Cat's mom and daddy fucked themselves to death. Hey, Cat, want to go out and hump on the bridge? I'm lucky you weren't a serial murderer or a Republican, I told Joe later. I would have married you anyway. It's pretty obvious I would have married the first man who didn't wince and grin and say, well, at least they died happy. I wasn't crying for them. They probably did die happy, he said. I was crying for you. Nobody should laugh at a child's grief. Nobody. Joe was a lovely man then, in the supple youth of his 20s, the image of my father when he smiled. My father was a tall, fair boy who came to Trinity College because his father and grandfather had come before him, and before them, his great-grandfather, Cornelius Compton, an Episcopal bishop, had helped found the university. The theological seminary, Compton Hall, bore their name, and young Corny Compton IV from Tidewater was destined to take his place in the Southern Episcopal hierarchy. Instead, he met my mother in the village at the start of his senior year, in our lone dry-cleaning establishment. She had come down from the very top of Morgan's Mountain to make a little money and see a little life, and all his fine passion fled the church in a rush and poured into her. They were married by the New Year, and I appeared in the earliest days of New Green May. I was a quiet child who absorbed a great deal of grown-up talk, and while I was still small, I came to know that my mother and father had done it practically the day they met and whenever after they could. I knew what it was, too, vaguely. I heard them so often whispering and laughing, and then breathing in that sharp, short way, and finally moaning and shouting aloud, that I ceased to be curious and never even bothered.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?